Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm going to show you how to take a CSF sample with our new EVD. So the first thing, you want to make sure you have a physician's order. You want to make sure that you have a clinical indication to get the CSF sample. We don't want to do it routinely. Whenever you're manipulating the system, you're going to do hand hygiene. The first thing I'm going to do is come into the patient and I'm going to turn off my panel mount stopcock to the drainage chamber burette. So this is essentially clamping the patient down here, but also allowing me to monitor the ICP during this time. You can do this for about 5 to 10 minutes. You want to make sure that you're watching your ICP so it doesn't get above your ordered range and you're giving your patient time to have some CSF collect in their ventricle. So whenever you're ready to actually draw the sample, you'll gather your supplies. You need sterile gloves, a surgical cap, alcohol swabs, a betadine swab, a 3 ml syringe, and a new non-vented sterile cap. So I'm ready to come in and draw my sample. I'm gonna put on my surgical mask. I'm gonna create a sterile field with my sterile gloves. I'm going to carefully open my sterile supplies and put it on my sterile field. I already have some open, alcohol swabs and a betadine swab that I opened really carefully that I'm just gonna put on the edge here. Oops, I'm running out of room. Okay, so I'll get on my sterile gloves. I'm gonna have 2 hands, a sterile hand, non-sterile hand, so I'll remove the cap. So our new EVD has 2 ports. We have a patient port here, a stopcock port, and then a CSF access port. So whenever we're drawing a CSF sample, we're gonna draw from the CSF access port. So this would have a sterile cap on it. It came off in our last example. So I'm gonna disconnect my old sterile cap from my CSF access port and with my non-sterile hand. And then I'm gonna take my iodine and I'm gonna scrub the port for 3 minutes with the iodine. I won't do that here just for the essence of time. And then I'm gonna take my alcohol swab. All of this is with my sterile hand. And I'm gonna wipe off the iodine. This just allows the port to stay clean. I'll attach my 3 ml syringe to my port. Depending on the sample that I'm drawing, I'm gonna draw the amount that is on the lab rec. So you need at least 0.5 mils. If you're doing a full cell count, you'll need the full 3 mils. So I'm gonna slowly withdraw. If I meet any resistance, I'll stop. I'll send the sample that I have, notify the physician. If I'm not having any trouble, not meeting any resistance, I'll withdraw the amount required over about a minute. You don't want to do it too fast. Once I have the full sample, I'll disconnect. I'm going to put this on my sterile field, keep the tip sterile, and then I'm going to take my new sterile cap. I guess I want to go like that. I'm going to take the new sterile cap, put that on my access port, and then take the sterile end of my sterile cap and put that on my sample. I'll label it and promptly walk it down to the lab. If it sits too long, the cell counts won't be accurate anymore. Also in the tubage system, if it shakes around too much, that can disrupt the result as well. So that's how you draw a sample. Jenny's gonna talk to you next.
Okay, real quick about troubleshooting a ventriculostomy, or just some basic skills you absolutely need to have when you're working with a ventriculostomy. Number 1 is, how do you check for patency of your system? This is vital, because if you go an hour without any CSF draining out when it's open, you want to make sure your system is patent. Otherwise, that's an emergent call to your neurosurgeon. So one thing you want to watch for, that's the quickest check is remember, typically this is completely the fluid is all the way to the chamber, right? So the easiest way to do, and remember, every time you move up the drain, you're not actually harming the patient, because it's when you drop if this becomes too low, then you could be sucking CSF and you can actually cause some bleeding in the brain. So the best way to check patency is watching to look for the meniscus. Remember, the meniscus is that little fluid level in the tubing. Well, like I said, typically this is full of fluid. So I do, again, with it open, patient open to the drain, go ahead and bring your drain up first. So what that's going to do is it's probably going to drop your fluid level down. And if you see the fluid level drop down and it's pulsating, then you have a patent system. You're good to go. If you don't see the fluid back up, nothing's moving, you have to question patency of the system. And at that point, I suggest bringing it, for example, if the physician ordered 10, at this point, you do want to drop it below the patient level ordered, but only for a few seconds. You never want to leave it below. I would then drop it below and see if you get any dripping. Again, you're doing this very quickly, 2 to 3 to 5 seconds to see if you have any dripping. If you still don't have any dripping, go ahead and bring that back up to your level. And at that point, I would suggest you grab your CNL for you to verify patency. But again, quickest way, go ahead and bring it up, look for the meniscus to drop and pulsate. You're golden. So if you haven't had CSF but you're patent, that means you just simply don't have, the pressure has not been high enough for it to actually drain. So you're okay as long as your system is patent. So let's go ahead and put that back. The other thing that you really need to know how to do is a manual ICP, because sometimes you get an ICP on your monitor, it's reading 12, and you're like, I think it might be higher because my P2 is elevated, or something that makes you suspicious, or the neurological exam has changed. So the quickest way to do this is, again, always bringing your chamber up is okay. Bring your chamber up. So let's say, because your patient was draining at 10, theoretically they shouldn't really be much higher than that because they've been draining, right? So what happens is go ahead and bring your thing all the way up. Again, you've already made sure your patient is level, so your top of the ear is level to 0. Bring it up. When that meniscus comes down and wherever it stops and is pulsating is actually your ICP. So remember, these are centimeters of water, this is millimeters of mercury. So if the meniscus comes back down, it stops about here and it's just pulsating, you come across millimeters of mercury, their ICP is about 15. That's the quickest way to do a manual ICP with the system. So bring it up. Now, if they are higher than, on this system, it's going to be 23. You can bring this whole system up just a little bit higher till you see the meniscus come down. Of course, you're going to be suspicious, and that means their ICP is higher than 23 if it takes up here until you actually see the meniscus come back down. So that's going to be a concern and a probable call to the neurosurgeon. Again, touch base with your CNL to make sure that they're helping you troubleshoot if you need that help. Thanks.